Hello and welcome back to Drop or Not, where I'm going to be going through every single seasonal show and finding out what's worth more than one episode. So to start off, I watched episode 1 of SSSS.Gridman. Yeah, Trigger's back with another show. Yeah, I didn't care a whole lot for Gridman, to be honest. So first episode is just sort of setting up a lot of stuff. We have, like, it introduces the characters. Main guy has amnesia. There's like a robot fight. He has to become, he has to use his superpower thing, whatever. It's a, I think, adaptation or reimagining of an old tokusatsu show, which definitely shows. And I mean, I'm not much of a tokusatsu guy myself, so, and that's not really that I don't care, I just haven't explored the field, so I wouldn't recognize anything that's, like, paying homage, and I imagine there are certain things here that are just, parts of that genre that people who are into that would like, especially, like, the fight scene, later in the episode. It's kind of goofy, like, the way the monsters move reminds me of those types of, it's a little more cheesy, but not necessarily in a bad way. But my big problem with Gridman is that it's just kind of boring. The main character has no personality whatsoever. I mean, literally the first thing we're introduced is that he has amnesia, and then he just sort of goes along with the flow. Like, he just goes through. There's nothing distinctive about his character at all. Like, I literally can't think of anything distinctive about his personality whatsoever, which is kind of an issue for a main character, when they're not remotely interesting in any sense. And they also have no, because they have amnesia, I know, like, nothing about them as a person outside of just their actions right now to at least somewhat inform me, give me some hope that they're an interesting person. And then all the other characters are pretty bland as well. I mean, at least they have some personality attributes, but nothing about the interactions really sold me on any potential for being all that engaging. And so from that front, we also have the visual side of things, and the general presentation. So the episode has a really weird choice in that in the entire first half, there's no music. Like, there's like literally no music. And it's not even like the entire thing is just this really dramatic, quiet, somber. Like, there's, like, comedic scenes. The tone is, like, varies between, like, a bit mysterious and just, like, whatever. So it just feels empty. The whole first half feels completely empty because there's no music behind it at all. And I imagine it was probably intentional, but it definitely didn't feel like it really did anything for the show, except make it worse. And then visually, the show looks better than most, I would say, most shows, but I have slightly higher standards for Trigger. At least I expect a little bit more out of them, and it didn't really deliver on my expectations. A lot of the shot framing presents the characters pretty far away and in very little detail. There's a lot of just, like, panning shots of one frame or just of the background that are really long. Like, there's a scene where it's got this weird, like, sort of fisheye perspective, and the guy is there and the camera's positioned below, and the camera just pans up for like 5 seconds. It's just pans and zooms on this one still frame, and it's kind of ridiculous. And there's a lot of that. Or when the characters are talking, they only move when they talk. Like, it's like they move to the next frame of the animation when they start talking, and then, like, but when they're not talking, they're completely stationary. Uh, yeah, a lot of the directing just feels not very expressive. Um, and I get, like, I like limited animation, but this just feels like sometimes it felt like I was just watching a straight up slideshow. Uh, yeah, really not a big fan. I'm willing to give this another episode, just to see, because I do feel like there's potential that maybe it could do something cool. Um, if we start giving the main character some personality, but yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't recommend this one myself. So that's Gridman. So, Goblin Slayer. Yeah, this is the show that's had everyone up in a tizzy, isn't it? Because there's a rape scene, guys. A rape scene. It's almost like no one's watched all those movies and OVAs from the 90s where that was like every single one. Uh, yeah, this was really, really, really bad. Okay, first off, visually, it's atrocious. Uh, the washed out colors are unpleasant. The character designs are really bland. Um, the animation itself is just bad. Like, not only does it go off model constantly, and it's super just stilted, the character movements, it's also like just randomly in CG sometimes. Like, the characters will just be CG occasionally for no uh, reason, and it looks pretty atrocious. Some of the walk animations, now that I'm thinking about it, made me laugh out loud. Like, it actually made me think. I haven't seen Berserk 2016, but we've all seen like the gifs and the clips, right, of the absurdly bad animation. There were moments in this that just were making me think of Berserk 2016 visually. Like, it's pretty bad on that front. And then story wise, it's also not spectacular because it does a whole, like, have this big dramatic, like, a bunch of characters die, so we can sort of say, like, hey guys, we're not your usual show. It's gonna be dramatic. Are you ready? I'm not a big fan of this story technique because, like, we have no reason to care about the characters they're killing. Um, so it just doesn't do anything for me. I mean, I don't necessarily hate it. Depending on how it's handled, it can be done better or worse. But in this case, it really didn't feel like it gave me any reason to be emotionally invested in the events that were occurring, because these 5 novices, I think it's 5, they're basically newbies. They go to this cave to slay goblins, and they basically just all die, except for the one girl who's saved by the Goblin Slayer, and he kills the goblins, and that's where I dropped it. Yeah, the show's not great, and, like, I know that it is that scene that had everyone so uh, enthralled, or at least, like, what was the reason the show's being so heavily discussed. But even then, it wasn't, like, all that bad. Like, I was expecting worse myself. Um, and again, it's like, it's just kind of there. Like, I don't know. It didn't really do anything for me. Um, and it's ugly. I didn't care about the characters. Like, okay, it's really macabre, or, like, it's just really dark, but I can get that anywhere. Like, that's not unique. We have one of these shows like every season, and this one's definitely not topping the list. So, yeah, would not recommend Goblin Slayers. The show is great. I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of episode 1. This is a short anime. It's about 11 minutes an episode, I think. Basically half the regular episode of anime. And the main character is this skeleton who also just happens to work at a bookstore. And it seems like the series is basically setting up that all the zany people coming into the bookstore, each episode's going to be, on whatever the premise they decide to focus on is. And episode 1 focuses on a bunch of yaoi fans coming into the bookstore and how yaoi unites all across the world. And it's hilarious. I just really enjoy it. In the first place, there's a lot of English, and that's just funny to me, and I imagine to a lot of us as Americans. Like, just hearing English is funny. Like, admit it, guys. Accents are funny. This doesn't need to be an argument. They are amusing, inherently. I think to most people at least. And so like it's funny because they have a lot of in this episode, because it's about this like global unity between yaoi fans. You have a bunch of like fans who are American coming to this bookstore that's set in Japan, and they're talking in English, so we get the English. But then also some of them try speak Japanese, and it's this hilarious, like exaggerated bad Japanese where like sumimasen. It's really quite amusing, and aesthetically the show is just really pleasing. The animation is kind of non-existent, but I'm okay with it because the show is appealing visually. It's got this nice cartoony, colorful style, and like the skeleton dude, like his expressions, I swear I could just make a whole folder of reaction images just on him, especially with he's got this very timid voice that further serves to emphasize the humor behind the fact that further serves to emphasize the humor behind the fact that he's, well, a skeleton. Yeah, I can see the show going in really funny places. I really liked the first episode. Also, the soundtrack is phenomenal. Love the music. It's a jam. Like, all the songs just immediately set the tone for, like, just sit back. This is gonna be a fun, bouncy, good time for 11 minutes. Just sit back and relax, and we'll take you along for a ride. So yeah, hyped for more episodes of this. Release of SPYCE is a show that's not for me, but might be for ye. It's certainly interesting to say the least, and I have to say I do like its charm. It's got this really goofy kind of we are gonna be what we are type of attitude that I appreciate. I mean, the premise is kind of absurd in that they're just straight up, they eat spices and that triggers their superpower abilities, like greater strength and stuff. And like in the very first minute, it's like you see them, they're like, release the spice, and they like chomp down on like a piece of cinnamon or like basil or something, and then they go kick, bad guy butt, and it's pretty funny, in like a sort of corny but fun, enjoyable way. And I like that angle. I like that part of it. But the big sort of issue I have is that, I mean, first off, it's not especially visually appealing. It just is kind of lackluster in that regard. There's nothing about it that particularly stands out or is all that appealing, and the character designs don't do too much for me. Just this general style, there's like a lack of, I don't know, anything distinctive, to the degree that it's kind of hard to like picture anything about it. Nothing really stands out or like ingrains itself in my memory at all about the episode visually. Yeah. And then the main reason I'm dropping it, for reference, I made it about halfway through episode 1, and then I started getting bored and dropped it. It's because of the characters. Now, this show is in a similar position as a couple other shows. The first one that comes to mind is Comic Girls, which I know a lot of people enjoyed, and I totally get why. I think it has a lot of merits. Um, but even though I held on to it past episode one in the previous season, drop or not, I ended up dropping it, I think, around episode three because I realized it just wasn't to my taste. And this show is similar in that regard, that the characters are just kind of annoying. They just are always talking. It's just this nonstop barrage uh, of just meaningless drivel, and it's kind of annoying. This type of stuff, like, I don't mind like just coming at me constantly in comedy. In fact, I prefer it because it more easily catches you off guard. But when it's just the characters are just saying words constantly, and it's not really trying to be funny, it's more just trying to be like, oh yeah, these characters are likable and charismatic and cute, and you should, like, you want to see them be in a relationship. Yori, 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 guys, we've got yori subtext, except it's not subtext, it's pretty much just text. uh it it's just it's just kind of annoying. I guess that's the way I would put it. It's just I find it kind of obnoxious, and it makes it hard for me to just care at all or be emotionally invested. Uh, when I just when it's when the characters all behave in this way that is like people I wouldn't want to be hang around with. I guess that's the way to put it. Like, I wouldn't want to be around any of these characters in real life, and they're not bringing me any like particular uh, humor. They're not making me laugh because I mean, there's like comedic characters that I wouldn't want to be around, but it's not that aspect. So like, if I wouldn't want to be around them, and it's not invoking any like strong emotional effect, uh, why keep going? But I do think there is an appeal, right? Like seeing the, I do think seeing in the way they have this sort of goofy, more goofy type of perspective, um, more campy, I guess is the word I would use. I could see it doing things that are unique and fun. So I would recommend giving this one a shot, especially if you're a fan of stuff like Comic Girls, which I know was pretty well received by a lot of people. So yeah, Ucha no Maid ga Uzasuguru is great. I just finished watching this episode, and it's like I had to take a second and be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is why I watch anime, right? This is why I watch anime. So premise: buff army ex army girl wants to care for a cute little lolly girl and becomes maid. And lolly girl does not like this fact and avoids the maid's loving advances. Uh, and the conflict is the center. Yeah, yeah, I dig this. I dig this. So, Doga Kobo show, if you don't know, they did New Game, which I also love, is adorable and cute and all around a good time, with some of the best character designs I've ever seen. The show, not quite as good, but definitely has a lot going for it. It's pretty funny. It's got characters that are enjoyable, and most notably, it's got animation. Wow, you know, it's weird thinking about it that like it has animation, right? Like the characters express themselves in unique ways that convey things about their character through this medium where we can do that. Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting to see stuff that like actually impressed me and caught my attention with the visuals. There's this awesome shot where she's like freaking out because she sees the maid person before they become a maid, just like hanging on a telephone pole, staring in her window, and she like freaks out and runs down the stairs to her dad, like stepdad's room, to get him to come up and help her. And it does like all these like dynamic camera angles, like the camera's like panning through the house as she runs through it, and it's doing all these different angles, below, above, to the side. And it's awesome. It really grabs your attention. It like emphasizes the franticness of the scene and her exaggerated motions. There's a lot of stuff like that, like maybe not there. That's the only like big especially notable like scene with like really dynamic camera movement, but the character animation in general is really, really expressive and just catches your eye because there's always something moving in a really fun, solid, enjoyable way. And of course, it's got a very nice color palette, as is typical of a lot of Doga Kobo's works. Um, yeah, I dig it. Okay, the maid girls, she's a little creepy. She's a little creepy, but that's also kind of the point. I think she's supposed to be a little creepy because that's what makes their conflict funny. Uh, but I mean, I'll admit, I'm mainly just watching it because it looks good, and then it's also funny. I mean, the characters themselves, I don't find all that interesting. It's kind of shallow. It's literally like the girl's whole character is that her mom died, so now she's like pent up her emotions. She got bullied because she's different since she's like European, so she's got she's fair skinned. Uh, it's not really all that deep or interesting, or I don't know. That part they really play up, like they remind you so many times in episode 1. Her mother's dead, guys. Remember, her mother's dead. Remember, her mother's dead. And it's a bit much, but I'm willing to forget that. Also, the soundtrack is terrible. They have like this really obnoxious audio cue they play every time the maid shows up in a creepy way. That's like it's like quoting. It's basically just quoting the Psycho thing. And then the Psycho themes kind of like it works for that, but this is just annoying, especially because they use it again and again and again, and it's just like it's like my ears. I hate it. And in general, the soundtrack is just really like the most bland, like exaggerated ideas of thing. Like she's European, Russian roots, so they play like the most generic Russian sounding piece you can imagine during her backstory scene. And stuff like that is just kind of too obvious about it, and there's no subtlety, and it's kind of annoying and obnoxious. So the soundtrack gets a thumbs down for me, but the animation gets 10 thumbs up. Love the visuals, and also it's pretty funny. I chuckled quite a bit. I laughed out loud quite a bit. So overall, quite a good time.